the set. We don't ever say that. I don't know why I said that. Welcome to the post show with
Welcome to the post show with the most show with your host shows
different.
Most Show and Show. Last week you were here. Did you watch the video by chance?
I did.
I'm gonna put you on blast because I called you my spiritual grandmother.
I did.
Last week.
That is, yep. And
all right, welcome back to the post show with your most shows, Mikey and Johanna.
I'm back.
And we are here to talk to you about everything this week at Awaken service.
Everything. We're going to talk about everything. It's going to be a long one.
Yeah. Did you smell that bathroom?
Settle in. It is cold out there.
You know, Levi's sermon this week, he went in a lot of different places, but I think one of the thoroughfares throughout was the idea of there being love in justice and finding the love in justice. Did that connect with you in any way, or do you have any thoughts around that?
I think it did. I was a concept that I hadn't really thought about until I have a specific memory of a time in my life where I was like, oh yeah, there is love and justice, and how those two connect. And it was when I was at this conference when I was a junior in college, which was only a couple of years ago, but it was a leadership conference where they talked all about how Jesus is the best leader. Just taking Christianity out of it, just as a person and as a historical figure, he was an amazing leader. And one of the speakers talked about, it was someone who was related to the fight against human trafficking. They came up and talked about how, they experienced some really horrific things, and they have to bring these people to justice, but how love also plays a part in that, and how God, loves perfectly, but is also just, which takes me back to thinking about Adam and Eve in the garden. And he handled that situation perfectly. And some people I think are he kicked them out of the garden and he did this and he did that and he separated them. But he was perfectly loving and perfectly just, removing them from that situation, but also making a plan for Jesus to ultimately come back and to mend that relationship, and how that is perfect love and perfect justice together.
Yeah.
And that is God. And I think we very often go to one side or the other, or we're too loving or we're too just, and we don't, because we're humans and we're sinful. It's really hard for us to imagine how those two things interact. But if we just look at God and the God throughout the stories in the Bible, that reminds us of how those two things interact.
Yeah, and I think the overlap there, at least one of the byproducts of that overlap, is probably rehabilitation, right? When we see love with injustice, we see rehabilitation. And I think for a lot of us, that's what the church can be, is that rehabilitation of our prior lives, of our inability to keep ourselves accountable and to walk in the path that God has set forth for us. And so when we find that love and justice intersection, we can find rehabilitation there. It's why we see Alcoholics Anonymous groups do so well, at least when they're God-centric, I believe, or God-forward. They have this beautiful cross-section of accountability and love and justice at the same time.
Yeah, and also grace, and not offering too much grace that makes people feel, free to fall back into their old sinful habits, but enough grace to make them feel free to move forward and feel free from their past.
Yeah.
So what stuck out to you in the sermon? Anything specific?
Yeah, I think, I was thinking about how we often take the law and we try to skew it in our own directions, and we try to serve ourselves with the idea of how we can interpret the law, and just how we're often trying to, almost a speck in the log type situation, which I feel like I'm talking about a lot, but we look at the ways that others are living their lives, and we interpret their lives through the law and what we believe about how we interpret the Bible, and yet we will sort of leave certain verses at the wayside, or put less importance over those things and more importance over the things that we're able to serve more easily. And I think it's a great challenge to just start to view the law for what it is, to dig a little bit deeper, start to understand the cultural and time significance of those verses, and to apply them further and to understand, what was going on when these laws were set forth, and who were the communities that they were specifically spoken to, and what was the purpose of these things, so that we can better take those things and not apply our own filter to them, which I think we're so often trying to do, but instead look at them through the God filter, which is the pure filter, which can it is larger than time. It's larger than context or community. It's the true filter of God.
Yeah, that makes me think of a couple, and maybe you have some thoughts on this too, a couple of ways that you can practically do that in your own life, because I think you could be hearing that and thinking like, oh yeah, well I can just like read the Bible and like then maybe that's just going to make it make sense to me, but that's not always true, There's a lot of context and culture going on, and it's not always just as easy as just like reading the Bible and finding the answer and being like, okay, now I can view it through the God lens. But one of the things that I think about is bouncing your thoughts and maybe your judgments off of somebody else that's also a believer, because we as collective believers are image bearers of God, and that is a really easy way to kind of bounce off some of your thoughts and judgments off of somebody else, to be like, hey, is this me? Am I putting my own, biases or my own thoughts in this? Or is this something that, I'm putting through the lens of God?
Yeah. And I think maybe even to add another layer to that, like I often think about the story of the Good Samaritan, right? We have this guy who's coming along who has every right to hate this person who's in a downward position to them. Yet still takes the time to stop, offer resources that they may not have very readily, and just give time and love to this person who they don't agree with anything about. They don't have any reason to have relation to. They would probably be better off if this person was dead, yet still took their time out to give love back to this person. And I think it's a great challenge for our... To bring in a term that we don't like to use within the church, but bipartisan, like our communities that are split by elections that are happening, or stances that we have on COVID, for instance, things that are so just divisive, and we put these hard walls and fences up between these topics. And yet the challenge within that story and within much of the Bible is to look at that person not as the enemy, but as someone that you can love and that you can learn from, and that you can give over your own needs and just forego those things to just serve that person well. Yeah,
I think that's a great way to tie in that story, and another thing that people can look at in the Bible and go back to that story of the Good Samaritan and just remind themselves of what that story is really about, because I think we hear about it a lot in Sunday school and as kids, and even just we mention it a lot, I feel like, within Christian communities, but going back and rereading it and reminding ourselves of that is a really great idea for the week.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody for joining us. We'd love to hear from you. If you have been attending Awaken virtually, we'd love to hear from you in a comment or a message, just so we can get to know you a little bit better. We have a lot of things going on here at the church. We have lots of community groups that are happening. We also have a big outreach event coming up with the Trunk or Treat. We'd love to have you join us. If you haven't been attending in person, that's a great event to come to get to know us better. So you can find out all that information on the Connect and Events tab on our website.
I always want to prompt you guys also to leave a comment down below. And what I would love to hear from you guys this week is, who would you like to see up here with us? Who would you like to have us rope into a conversation? Call them out below, tag them. We'd love to talk to them. And with that, we will see you guys next week,
have
if not sooner.
Week.
I said sooner.
Yep.